Many of you now know that there are several headwinds that demand to be addressed with regards to Windows and Mac OS, and the solution is to use Linux. Just to remind you of these headwinds, many of you on Windows 10 are about to lose support from Microsoft and will be forced to migrate to Windows 11 starting on October 14, 2025, which is the week after this video is released. Some of you have machines that are running perfectly fine but are suddenly labeled as machina non grata by Microsoft because it does not have a TPM security chip. So they want to consider it e-waste now. You cannot upgrade these to Windows 11. In the meantime, if your machine allows it, once you move to Windows 11, the Copilot features are now activated and suddenly you have a very invasive spy machine that records every action you take on the computer. It doesn't take a privacy guru like me to feel that this just isn't right. Every new computer model is pushing the AI companion as something you need, but you know you don't need it, nor do you want it watching you. Those eyeing those fancy new M4 MacBooks will be subject to the same threats as Windows with the release of Apple Intelligence. In fact, they're already running the media analysis D spyware now. But though you know you ought to switch to Linux, many of you balk at this because you don't know what to expect. Now let me tell you a little fact. If I hand a computer running Linux already pre-installed to a non-computer expert, they'll be able to do normal things very intuitively. It's not that difficult. If you're using Windows for some specific work application, maybe you're not aware of the dual boot option or the virtual machine option, it doesn't mean you have to abandon Windows 100%. What holds you back are fears that you will make a huge mistake and it is irreversible, or fear of installation woes.
All right, I'm going to move this to the front of the video. Windows 11 is nothing but a giant spyware tool to record everything you do on the internet. Don't run Windows 11. It's a terrible, terrible operating system. It should have never been created. Don't use it ever. All right, we're out exercising the boss dog. Windows 11 is dead. I hope you enjoyed that video up front. I'll tell you who that was. That was Rob Baxman, Tech, if you ever want to watch his channel. He does excellent work on privacy, operating systems, you name it. He's one of my heroes on YouTube. I don't watch him as often as I should, but I will tell you this, we've got a lot of people on YouTube saying the same thing, and for various reasons. We're going to get into it. And I've got the words here. Windows 10 users are now facing the end of life of their OS since their particular computers have been classified as computer junk by Microsoft. So you may be teased to thinking that it's time to move to Windows 11. But actually, it is time to dump Windows for good. And then, of course, the Microsoft plan, which he revealed later in the video, is they want you to put everything on their servers. Your whole life, your contacts, your passwords, your files. They want to trap you into subscription plans. Not only that, from what I understand, yes, Windows 10 is still going to get security updates, but they're going to start making you pay for those. So even that's going to be on a subscription plan. So you can see that Microsoft is going to bleed you dry. They even want you to be logged in at all times so that they can monitor everything that you're doing. Now, if you're willing to give up everything on your computer to Microsoft, by all means, keep using Windows. But I'm not. So you say, well, what am I going to do? I'm not going to go buy a Macintosh, right? Well, it turns out Apple's kind of adopting the same business model. So Macintosh is really not the way to go either. So what's the real alternative? Well, it's going to be Linux. Okay, and let's continue with on Windows for just 1 second. So Windows, I don't know if you've noticed, it's just one big advertisement. There's a software tool we're going to get into here in a minute that you can download and that you can use to block Edge from putting, because Edge is in control of your computer. You can't even, it runs as a background process and you can't uninstall it, which is utterly ridiculous. So, and of course, if you look at on your Windows operating system, everywhere you look, there's an advertisement. So Microsoft, not only are they stealing all your data, they're making money on advertisements, pushing them down to you on everything that you click on the computer, unless you disable it all. And without the tool that I'm going to tell you about, it's practically impossible to do. Not even Grok. I would ask Grok, how do you do this? How do you do that? And then, of course, trying to do a local login. Now, I've got my computer right now because I am running Windows 11 on a laptop. And I have been able to set it up with a local login, but it wasn't easy. And some of the YouTube videos that I've been watching, as soon as, because that's another problem. Microsoft is pushing down automatic updates. And from what I understand, there's no way to turn off the automatic updates. Okay, and what's happening is, okay, you got a local login, you got it all set up. Boom, an update comes down and then Microsoft is suddenly prompting you, you need to log in to Microsoft so that we can spy on you. So, you know, so not even setting your computer up as a local user can even work, because eventually Microsoft's going to punish you for that and make you log in to their online environment. So what's the, oh yeah, so here's the tool that you want. And I'll put it in the description on the video. It's the WinAERO, WINAERO tweaker. The WinAERO tweaker. And it is awesome, man. It's just its ability to shut down Windows Edge makes it worth it. But I wanted to get a couple of other YouTubers that I don't necessarily follow, but I liked what they had to say about Windows. This is Polycap Media. This is a 12-minute video. I'm going to steal his entire video because this is the best video that describes the error of Windows 11 that I could possibly find. And I don't like taking other people's video, but I've given him attribution. If I'm telling you, go watch his channel. He's got some good videos, and this is the best one. Let's watch Polycarp Media for 12 minutes right now.
All right, people. Windows is no longer your friend. Windows is no longer a tool. It is now a weapon being used against you. And here's why you should switch over to Linux. Now, why do I say that Windows is no longer a tool, but a weapon being used against you? Because let's take a look at a few things. They are constantly shoving Microsoft Edge, which is basically borderline spyware at this point because it tracks all of your data, your search history. It has access to all of your login information. So if like a data breach happens or something, bad actors can get a hold of all of your information and log in, steal your banking information. I'm not saying that other browsers are more secure, but I don't want to have all of my eggs in one basket. There are ads absolutely everywhere, all over the operating system. You pull up the start menu, there's ads in the start menu. When you're just looking for a certain program or trying to find a file, boom, there's ads everywhere. It is constantly reminding you to sign up for OneDrive so that all of your files and data and everything can be hosted by Microsoft on the OneDrive. But I don't like having all of my data stored on someone else's computer, and potentially them having full access to it when it's none of their business. And also, if you all remember back in the day, during the Windows 7 era and before, you would get Microsoft Office for free. It came with the operating system and you could use it as much as you wanted, and you didn't have to sign in to any specific thing. You didn't have to pay for anything. It just came with the operating system when you bought the computer. Now it's a subscription service, and you can't access it without having, one, a Microsoft account and paying X amount per month or per year to use it. Yeah, Microsoft is basically just milking you for every single dime, potentially, that they can get out of you because they're just greedy. Now, some of you may be aware of my last couple videos or so that I talked about. I work for a local IT company, and we also do a lot of computer recycling and everything. I'm kind of the main guy that kind of handles that. Whereas we get old computers from old clients of ours, and we try to repurpose them and resell them so that they can still remain in use if they're still, new enough to be able to be used. So we would take the old hard drive or the SSD or whatever, dispose of it properly, and then we would get a new one and install Windows 11 on it. Now, for those of you that have gone through the out-of-the-box experience with Windows 11, you're setting it up and everything. If you bought a new computer, you have to go through and select a certain number of things, and then it tells you to sign in. You have to sign into your Microsoft account. Then you have to connect your computer to the internet so that it can get updates and all this nonsense, which takes absolutely forever. But people have found workarounds of if you press Shift F10 and you type in a certain command and everything, and allows you to skip certain portions of that startup. This allows you to get straight to the desktop, and then you can basically set up what's called a local account where Microsoft has no access to your computer and it's just yours. Because if you have a Microsoft account connected to that computer, Microsoft has basically full access to your computer and can look at your data, your pictures, your videos, your search history of anything that you've used on the computer. They have basically full access to it, and you're basically allowing them to peek through your window. I don't know about you, but that kind of concerns me. I don't want some trillion-dollar corporation being able to look inside my computer and be like, what's this guy up to? It's none of their damn business. Would you just hand your phone to a stranger with it unlocked and saying, feel free to look at all of my personal stuff? It's none of their business. Now, recently, within the last week or so, Windows has now put out some updates for Windows 11 that doesn't allow folks like myself or people that don't want to set up with a Windows account, doesn't allow us to bypass that portion of the setup to where you can set up as a local account. They're basically blocking all ability to set up Windows 11 as a simple local account. They are forcing you to sign in or create a Microsoft account to where, again, like I said, they have full access to your computer and they can do and see whatever they want. This is just a major red flag of them trying to exert more and more control over the populace. Since so many people are so used to using Windows on a regular basis, whether it be for work or home or play or whatever, that they feel that they have the right to do whatever they want with their operating system. And the problem is that people just say, oh, well, it's convenient because this is what I use, this is what I'm familiar with, everybody uses it, it works, blah, blah, blah. But I think that's kind of a cop-out of just being lazy, in the sense of you're just allowing a big corporation to basically do all the thinking for you and basically have total control over your entire computing operations. I would highly encourage you to not just sit by and comply. You need to be your own advocate and stand up for your rights and not allow these big corporations to just bully you into, or force you for that matter, into conforming to what they want and doing whatever they want. You do have options out there. And this is why I encourage you all to take a look into Linux. It is not as scary as a lot of people think. Some people have never even heard of it. I'll spare you the long history lesson, but basically it is a much more privacy-friendly opportunity for those of you that want to get away from the Windows ecosystem. And here's why you should. Because Linux is free and open source. It works. It can be used for so many different things. And within the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years or so, Linux has become a huge competitor against Apple and now Microsoft, in the sense that more programs work with Linux or on Linux than don't. Think of how you use your computer. Do you use it for work? Do you use it for home? What do you use it for? Do you store photos? Do you store videos? Do you create videos on it? Do you use it for music production? Do you do it for simple office work where you're creating just like Excel spreadsheets, you're creating PowerPoints for school, you're writing papers for school, or you simply just doing everything on the web? All that can be done in Linux as well. And here's the cool point. It's all free, because Linux is free and open source, to where that you, if you're savvy enough, can look at the source code of the entire operating system and change and mess with whatever you want. And if you're not as quite as savvy like me, I'm more of an end user than anything, and I use the operating system as it's given to me. Yeah, I've tweaked a few things here and there, but I basically use it as is. You can use what's called the package manager, and for those of you that aren't familiar with it, it's basically an app store. And yes, Linux came up with the concept of app stores long before Apple or Google Play did. Basically, you go into the package manager and you find the program that you're looking for. You hit install, and it sends a code off to the internet, finds the program of its latest updates for your specific operating system, and installs it just like that. No hunting down websites, no using drop-down menus for finding your specific operating system or your version or finding the proper download. Just one simple click and it's yours. Now, here's the really cool thing about Linux is that, like I said, that it's free and open source, and you, if you're tech savvy enough, can look at the source code and see what's going in and out of your computer. And the folks that have developed many of the different distros for Linux and everything want nothing to do with your data. They are simply creating an operating system to be used as a tool, and that only. So privacy is of utmost importance to them. And here's also the great thing about Linux, is that it is completely free to use. All you gotta do is go to the specific website for that specific distro, click download it to your computer, use a flash drive, flash it to that drive, put it into the new computer, and install it. It's as simple as that. Now, if you're interested in learning how to do that, I will create a very specific video of how to install Linux Mint, which is the distro of my choice, which I find the most simple to use. It is very beginner friendly, it looks very similar to Windows, and has a very similar layout and style. And I've been using Linux Mint for years, and I've had zero issues with it. Now, while using Linux, there are a few things you may have to give up. Now, if you're a huge gamer, gaming has actually become extremely useful on Linux. I primarily game on Linux these days. More games work on Linux than don't actually work. And if you're curious about any of your games, whether they work or don't, on Linux, feel free to look up ProtonDB, type in the game that you play the most, and see if it works. They all come with a very specific rating of how well they work, or if they don't. Like very specific games that have to use like an anti-cheat, like Call of Duty Warzone, Battlefield, Valorant, these kind of arena PvP shooters and stuff like that. A lot of those do not work on Linux, and it's not because the game developers choose not to, or Linux chooses not to. It's the anti-cheat software that doesn't work on Linux. So the game can potentially run if you're wanting to do like the campaign or something like that. Those will work on Linux. But if you get into those arena shooters where it's this online PvP action, I'm sorry, but that's just not going to happen. Now, if you're a PC gamer and you use Steam, most of your games will work as long as you're using some version of Proton. Now, let's say you're a video creator like myself. You want to create videos while working on Linux. Well, I'm sorry to say that the Adobe software does not work on Linux. However, there are many alternatives that you could use, such as DaVinci Resolve, which is considered to be an industry standard, just like Adobe Premiere. So even though you may have a very niche and very specific type of software that you have to use, whether it be for work, college, or just play or whatever, there are alternatives if that specific software does not work on Linux. There are plenty of workarounds for almost anything. So again, I would highly encourage you to not just sit idly by and let Windows take over your entire computing operations, and to stand up and take back control over your personal devices. And use it as you see fit because it's your own personal device. Again, if you're interested in learning how to install something like Linux Mint, I'll create a separate video for that shows you a step-by-step guide of how to download it from the web and install it on a new computer. Thank you all for watching, and again, remember, Windows is not a tool anymore. It is a weapon used against you.
Wasn't that fantastic? All right, so there's another tool you can get called notebookcheck.net. You can go to that website, notebookcheck.net, and that's got some good information on disabling. I think you're stupid to stick with Windows, and we're going to get into that here in just a minute. So let's see. We talked about the login. Oh, here's another video. This is LMB Clips on getting around the login. Let's watch that video now.
Microsoft is blocking more ways to set up a Windows 11 local account. When announcing Windows 11 Insider Preview Build 26.120.6772, Microsoft revealed that they are removing known mechanisms for setting up an offline or local account. Microsoft says users will need to complete their Windows 11 setup with an internet connection and with a Microsoft account. As you would probably expect, It was not long before folks started to make workarounds. And Notebook Check, who we were reading when we were looking at this development, already has some examples of how to make a local account on Windows 11's new build. So if you guys want to head on over, I'm not saying, look, okay, Google, just calm down. You have a little relax.
I think you should. I think you should go read the article, and I think you should make a local account.
I am not providing anyone with instructions to anything.
I think you should do it.
This is Notebook Check, an unaffiliated website with which I have nothing to do. I don't even know if they have ever even associated with me in any way. Maybe they said mean things about me. I literally don't know. What I do know is that this is not a page that you should ever look up. There. Please don't take down my WAN show.
Discussion question. Aside from simply allowing local accounts, what can Microsoft do to repair Windows 11's public image?
I mean, dude, where do you even start?
Okay, and we're going to get into a fourth video here soon. So, what's the alternative? Linux. Everybody says, oh my God, Linux is not user-friendly. Linux doesn't support my hardware. Years ago, Linux, when Ubuntu came out, it became almost a Windows-like graphical environment for you to work in, which was awesome. But years ago, the hardware support really wasn't all that great. You know, Windows has always had great legacy support. So if you're one of those people who can't upgrade to Windows 11 and you're stuck on 10, Linux is guaranteed to run on that old hardware. And that's been the niche that Linux was always in. Not anymore. Linux now runs on new hardware. It's got AMD and NVIDIA support. Now, maybe not the latest drivers like that are in Linux, but it takes a while for the developers in Linux to figure out what's going to work. You know, when NVIDIA puts out a new driver, they usually put it out for Windows, and then it has to be adapted to Linux. But the point is, you're still going to have an NVIDIA driver that'll work just fine in Linux, okay? So there's really no reason not to go to Linux. And then the question becomes, which version of Linux? There's about, it seems to me like there's 100 of them. I've looked at them all. I'm going to tell you what. Of course, I do video editing. I'm building a new server. We're going to get into that in just a minute. I do video editing, so my biggest concern was, number one, NVIDIA support and AMD support. And number two, could I run DaVinci's Resolve on that Linux environment? And number three, what was the most, because I don't just use my computer strictly for video editing. Sorry, I got some bugs buzzing me here. Daggone it. And I don't, so I want to be able to do, everything else on the computer. My password management, my email, which is, and you can do it pretty much in any flavor of Linux. But the best one in my mind, and I've tried a bunch, is Linux Mint 22.2. Cinnamon, the Cinnamon desktop. Now, what's the advantage of Linux Mint over Ubuntu? Because Ubuntu actually has a flavor of Linux called Ubuntu Studio, which is specifically designed to work with DaVinci Resolve and be a studio. It comes with the OBS studio software, everything preloaded for you. Why wouldn't I want to use that? Well, Cinnamon is built on top of basically the foundation of Ubuntu. So they're basically the same operating system. I mean, they get the same level of support. That's what I mean. Because Conical, if you didn't know, Conical is a huge company, and they're the makers and keepers of Ubuntu. All right. So by Linux Mint, basing their Cinnamon environment on the Conical software means that you're pretty much up to date with where Ubuntu is. So when Ubuntu comes out with a new version, within a month or two, you're going to have a new version of Linux Mint. The other thing I like about Linux is they've got long-term support. Okay, whether it's Ubuntu or Mint, Okay, now you could go Fedora, but I will tell you this. I didn't go Fedora or Red Hat, if you want to say, if you wanted to pay for it, because guess what? Red Hat is being rolled into IBM. It's going to cease to exist. They're actually bringing the developers into IBM, and from what I understand, laying some of them off. And I don't want to be tied. I mean, it's just like being tied to Microsoft, right? Or tied to Apple. You know, the whole point of Linux is to get away from the big companies. So, you know, I don't want to be tied to IBM, nor do I trust IBM. You know, I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, maybe you like IBM. I don't. I remember back in the day when, you know, everybody at IBM had to wear a suit. I thought that was stupid as hell. So let's keep going with the notes here. Oh yeah, so then the question became, once I decided on Linux Mint, because I'm building a new computer, and we'll get into that build probably in the next video. All right, so the next question was, which operating system, or which file management system do you want to run? You know, if you know Windows runs on NTFS. Okay, and hey, that's another thing about Windows. There's a lot of people who have dual boot configurations, where they boot into Linux, or they can boot into Windows. Or, you know, they might be running ext4 partition on their computer. Well, it turns out Windows 11 doesn't like anything about Linux. And they're putting little time bombs in there to blow up anybody's ability to run Linux side by side with Windows, which is another reason to get away from Microsoft. You know, the advantage, I don't know if you've ever done a dual boot, but the advantage is that there's certain things you can do in Linux that you can't do in Windows, and there's certain things in Windows that, you know, I don't say there's anything in Linux that you can't do that Windows does. It's just sometimes it's a bit more difficult. Like just the installation in Linux Mint, installing the Video Studio, it's a somewhat involved process, and maybe I'll make a video on installing DaVinci Resolve in Linux Mint 22.2, but it wasn't that hard. There's actually a script that automates the install. Now, what does DaVinci Resolve recommend? They recommend Rocky Linux. Now, I looked at Rocky Linux, and Rocky Linux, once again, is based on Fedora. And as I told you, I gave you my reasons. I don't want to be tied to IBM. And plus, I don't know that, I haven't really played with Rocky Linux, so I can't slam it, okay? But it seems to me it's somewhat limited. Whereas Mint, you got everything in it. So I didn't want to go with Rocky Linux either. So we've talked about Ubuntu, and there's other flavors of Linux. You've also got OpenSUSE, which is actually supposed to be really good. And their Tumbleweed edition, they're keeping rolling updates. So it's always pretty up to date. Now, I haven't played with OpenSUSE in many years, so I can't vouch for it. And then, of course, you got Kali Linux. Now, Kali Linux I'll run in a virtual machine. Kali Linux is a hacking operating system. It comes with everything you need to reach out and touch someone on the internet. Hopefully not maliciously. Hopefully you're a white hatter just trying to help somebody through using Kali Linux. But you know, I probably won't play with it for a while. So let's see. We talked about oh yeah, and so another thing was people were talking about, okay, DaVinci Resolve, what's the level of compatibility, you know, for running it on Linux Mint? Well, 100%, it'll work great. Not a bug. What is with the bugs today? It'll work great, obviously, on Rocky Linux because it's designed for that. So 100% on Rocky Linux. When I talk to Grok, it says about 90, you're going to get about 90 to 95% functionality on Linux Mint. That's good enough for me. I don't use some of the advanced features in DaVinci Resolve. By the way, I was watching a video before I came out on DaVinci Resolve. They've got 3 new AI features that just came out in the latest version. I mean, they are badass. You can do some really cool things that used to take many hours of editing. And I need to learn how to do that. All right, let's keep going. We talked about Fedora. Oh yeah, the software manager. All right, so, well, actually, let's get back to the file system. So you've got BTRFS, which is the latest version of the Linux operating file system management. And then you've got the old, that's been around for a while, the ext4. And then, of course, you've got XFS. Now, Grok recommends XFS for using on Linux for best video support. However, when I checked around, a lot more stuff will run on the ext4, and ext4, because I've got 64 terabytes of disk space, and I was a bit worried whether ext4 could handle that much, and I don't know, ext4 cuts off at like an exabyte or something huge, and then of course XFS is like, I mean, I couldn't even imagine. You could almost run a whole data center on XFS because of the amount of storage that it can cover. So that's another reason. So so we got Linux Mint, ext4 for the file system, and then what was the next question? We talked about Fedora. Oh yeah, and then of course there's software management. Now I used to use apt. You can do apt-get, and you could go out on the command line and get all of your software. And the thing I liked about that was I could build operating systems. I could put a script together and downloading all the tools that I wanted, and I could install a new version of Linux on the same computer and then just run that script, and boom, I had everything right there. Well, that would be a cool way to do it, but the better way now is Linux Mint comes with what's called a software manager, which is outstanding. It's the same as the Microsoft Store or the Google Play App Store. It's exactly the same. And the thing that I like about it is it gives you the best way to install things. In Linux Mint, there's basically two ways to install. And you can do Snap if you want to, but it's not well supported in Linux Mint. Whereas Snap you'd have to study ways to install software. But the software manager in Linux Mint, you can do a flat pack install or just an integrated install of basically sometimes the same package. Now, there's advantages and disadvantages to either. Well, when I've got 64 terabytes of storage, I'm going with the flat pack. And what is the flat pack? The flat pack kind of comes down as its own little unit. Its own little environment, kind of like a sandbox, if you will. If you're not familiar with a sandbox, that's where you can isolate a portion of an operating system and make it so that when a hacker gets on there, they can't get to that portion of the system. It's the same as the old IBM virtualization that we used to do back in the day. Because when you have one virtual computer on an IBM mainframe, you couldn't hack the other virtual computer, even though it was running on the same software. So Flatpak is very similar. So what happens is you get better performance because everything comes down with that Flatpak. If it needs certain libraries and stuff, it all comes down. Well, what's the sacrifice there? Well, you're obviously losing disk space. Okay, and also it won't be quite as fast as integrating it with the operating system. But when you've got an advanced processor, which we'll get into like I have, and you've got 64 terabytes of disk space, obviously I'm not concerned with the disk space. And performance-wise, I doubt I'm going to see any difference, even though I'm running as a Flatpak. Okay? So, the other thing that's nice about the software manager is they rate the downloads. So you can look and you can say, okay, this downloads, the Flatpak is rated with 4.5 stars, because Linux people will go up and they rate the software. And then you look at the integrated software and it's rated with 4 stars. So you kind of get a feeling like, well, do I want to integrate it or do I want to Flatpak it? And from what I can tell, most of the time the Flatpak is higher rated than the integrated software, but you can install either one. I wouldn't install both, ever. So if you're going to run OBS Studio on a Flatpak, for example, you don't want to try to download the OBS Studio to integrate it with your operating system. I haven't tried it, but I imagine you're going to run into some conflicts with that, trying to do that. All right, so we're just going to get through page 1 today. We got 5 videos coming. All right, that's everything I wanted to tell you about Linux. All right, so let's talk about the hardware that we need for DaVinci Resolve. Okay, and if you haven't looked at hardware in a while, one of the things I would highly recommend is if you're going to buy a new motherboard and processor, get it as a bundle. Okay, don't buy your processor and your motherboard separately. Okay, if you go up onto Amazon or Newegg or wherever you want to go, microcomputer, Newegg's kind of, I don't know what's happened to them. Their prices aren't as good as Amazon a lot of times. And of course, the microcomputer, sometimes they might have a local store where you can go in and buy stuff, which is always nice because you get to look at it beforehand. And they've got pretty good prices online if you want to use them. Well, we're going to go with the first thing, and I'll just give this to you. So I bought the Micro Center AMD Ryzen 9 9950X. Now that's the latest, I believe that's the latest processor that AMD has put out. Now, can I have saved money by going with a lesser processor? Sure, but you're not going to save that much money. When you go down, one level in a processor, you might save $50, $100, whatever. Is that worth it? I mean, why not just get the Cat Daddy, right? And the Cat Daddy won't be the Cat Daddy forever. The 9900, or the 9950, I'm sure at some point it's going to be, come down. But I guarantee you that processor will last me, well, the last time I built a computer, it lasted 20 years. And it's still going strong. It's just, it's gotten so old, it's really slow. The storage on it's just not there. It's a pain in the butt. So it was time to get rid of it. But think about that. My last computer build lasted 20 freaking years. How long do you think? I'll be dead before I have to replace this computer. Now, the bundle that I bundled that with the Gigabyte X870E AORUS master motherboard, which is an ATX DDR5 memory. It's got 4 M2 slots. It's got PCIe 5.0 for your video card, a USB 4 port, and it runs Wi-Fi 7 if you want it to run it Wi-Fi, which is the latest support for Wi-Fi. I mean, but on a motherboard that good, I would plug it into the LAN if it's at all possible. I mean, sometimes if you want to be able to run the server, way away from the router, Wi-Fi 7's not a bad way to go. That's still screaming fast. Okay, so let's get to the next piece of hardware. We'll get to a little bit on page 2, and then we're going to cut this video because it's gotten long in the tooth here. So, I wanted to talk about this. This will be the last thing we talk about in this video, was cooling. Now, in the past, I always air-cooled my processors, okay? And the air coolers, they just got bigger and bigger and bigger and better and better. I mean, air cooling, if you got an older processor, it's still not a bad way to go. But I'll tell you this, on my last computer build, which I did, well, actually here recently, but I had the hardware for about 2 years before I actually got the computer built. I won't go into that story. But anyway, I used an air cooler. The air cooler, even though I had a big case, the air cooler, I couldn't put the front panel on the computer because the air cooler stuck out so much, once I mounted it on top of the processor. So I wasn't going to go that route. Plus, the new processors, they run so hot. Water cooling, now I know water cooling sounds insane. I've never done it myself, so this will be a first for me. Number one, it looks cool inside the case because it seems like all the good cases come with the glass finish. They just figure you're going to be a gamer. I couldn't care what the case looks like. I want the functionality. And we'll get into the case in the next video on what I bought. Oh man, I dropped my page. Anyway, it's the acrylic water cooler. Let me go get the page and we'll just tack on just a little bit more to this video. Hold on.
If you've seen any of the other videos on this channel, you know there aren't any lovers of Microsoft around here. But while some might think that this is more of a let's pick on the big corporation for the fun of it because we're trolls, it goes a lot deeper than that. But just in case those words mean absolutely nothing to you, let me show you where this is coming from. This is coming from someone who didn't just bet on the wrong console generation once, but twice. So safe to say, this is coming from someone who invested heavily in the Microsoft ecosystem, at least when it came to gaming. So this is a genuine concern from someone who has been a loyal customer to Microsoft. This isn't just another console war soldier. There was no PS4 to be seen while this was under the TV. And now this is just a Blu-ray player. And it can't even do that. It stopped doing that. Great. Maybe because of that full page ad they're trying to shove down everyone's throat. So a Windows 10 gaming PC is what replaced that. So let's take you through why that said gaming PC had Windows wiped from it entirely, why no PC in this house will ever have Windows installed on it ever again, and why it might be worth you considering the same for yourself. Let's start at the top. PCs all have different functions, but normally the very first thing you do with a PC is log on to it. At least, that's the default. Used to be back in the day, there was this magical thing called auto login. So if your PC didn't have personal information on it of any sort, and that was a shared family PC for everyone to play games or surf the internet and it just didn't matter, you could auto log into it. Or, more importantly these days, with people trying to make their own Steam consoles, you could sit on the couch, turn on your PC, and have it automatically log in and boot up Steam. But you don't have that choice anymore if you're using a Windows PC. In fact, the amount of hoops you have to jump through just to make auto login work, going into regedit just to mess with files that are designed not to be messed with by a user, just so you can have the privilege of auto login. It's ridiculous, especially when so many other operating systems on the market actually give you the option to auto login. It shouldn't be so hard to do such a simple task on your own PC. But why does Microsoft insist that you use a password every time you log into your PC, regardless of how you want to use that PC? Well, let's look at the next thing they won't let you do anymore. Local accounts. Back in the day, you created an account that was unique to your PC. If you wanted to go to a different PC, you would have to create a different account. And those two accounts, even if they had the same name and password, were isolated. Separation, containerization, and actually a good thing for privacy. These days, you have to have a Microsoft email address to use a Windows 11 PC. At least that's the way that Microsoft is pushing it. Because even the workarounds to get a local account working on a new Windows computer, which are slowly being broken as we go, even though people keep finding new ways, Microsoft keeps breaking it, a running theme. Now they're going to get to the point where you can't even use the PC with a local account. So let's talk about that magical media PC that should be able to auto log in. So now anyone who wants to use that PC either needs to have their own Microsoft email, or if you want them to use yours, this is already getting way too complicated for a family PC, but now everything they do on that PC will be tied back to your email. And even if you're using a spam email, every time a retailer sends you a sale, Microsoft now not only knows the computer you're using it on, but also knows where you potentially shopped. They're building a profile on you. And to make things worse, they're sharing that data with hundreds of advertisers. Hundreds of advertisers. No, I didn't leave that in twice by accident. And they disclose it as if, what are you going to do? Switch operating systems? And because you had to sign in with your email address, everything you do on that PC will be tied back to you so that they can sell ads back to you. And anything else anyone else does on that PC under your account will be tied back to you. Because you're not just using Windows. Windows is using you. But this isn't the first channel to tell you that Windows is stealing your data, and it definitely won't be the last. Everything you do on Windows is being tracked. The amount of internet traffic happening on your PC when you're doing absolutely nothing, and the amount of that traffic that is just Microsoft, even if you haven't installed something else, is astronomical for a PC that should be idle. Isn't it a bit weird that your PC is always doing something even if you're not doing something on your PC? And if you don't believe me, check your task manager, because that's where it all is. Lots of processes that you'll have a tough time figuring out what they actually do, because Windows is proprietary software, meaning that you can't see the code in there. Only Microsoft can. So only Microsoft can tell you exactly what's going on, and they're not going to, because that would hurt their bottom line. And just in case you didn't think that was creepy enough, guess what's coming to a Windows 11 PC near you? Copilot, Recall, AI shoved into your operating system, whether you like it or not, because they dominate the market, so no one can tell them no. So now, every few seconds, your PC will be taking screenshots of your desktop and anything you're doing on said desktop. And even though they've said this will only be stored on your device locally, do you really believe them? Because we all believed them when they said Game Pass was profitable, and then they increased the price, but we'll get onto that part later on. For now, the idea of someone walking past your PC every few seconds to see what you're doing, shouldn't you have a choice whether that sort of thing is installed on your computer? Well, no, you don't, because it's not your computer. The moment you install Windows, you relinquished the right to do what you want with your computer. So maybe you're going to argue the I have nothing to hide way of thinking, but there's a reason we lock the front door to our house. Let's pretend for a moment that you are a nefarious actor, someone who wants to do something bad and take advantage of people. And you also happen to be some sort of software developer or hacker. So you know your way around a computer, you know how to write software, and you're going to use these skills for bad purposes. If you were going to design a virus, which operating system would you design it for? Have a look at the market share. What's going to reap the most rewards for your efforts? Let me tell you, the time I spent on Apple, I didn't have a single virus, and that was over a decade. That's not to say that Mac viruses don't exist, but they're rare because people aren't often targeting people on Macs. The same goes for alternative operating systems. But now those people, if they get their software, their malware, their virus running on your computer, now they have a treasure trove of things to pick from. They don't just have your most recent email. They have every screenshot that your computer has ever taken. They have your banking details because they don't get scrubbed when Copilot or Recall takes a photo of it every few seconds. They know everything about you and can impersonate you to a T. But maybe one of your solutions is, I just won't update. If I don't update, then that means that I won't get any of this spyware being installed forcibly. But you don't get a choice when to update either. We've previously mentioned how the Microsoft Store now stops you from choosing when to update said apps. So if an app goes bust, or there's something in that app that you don't like, for example, all the nonsense that happened with newer versions of Firefox at the beginning of this year, well, if you installed it through the Microsoft Store, guess what? You don't get to choose. Microsoft is going to auto-install them. Which is a step too far from people who might argue that automatic updates on your Windows PC were important for security to protect against those bad actors. But it's your PC. You should still get a choice when to do those updates. But you don't. I'm sure your boss will understand when your Windows PC randomly shuts down in the middle of, say, an important meeting or just before a deadline with your work unsaved, just for it to spend, if you're lucky, minutes booting back up while it does forced updates, even though you said whichever option was closest to not now, I'm busy, or if you're really unlucky, hours to do those updates. Try telling your boss that it's Microsoft's fault that you can't finish your work. And furthermore, how many times has an update broken another app or program that was working perfectly fine before? These aren't just hypotheticals. This is coming from personal experience. And what were those updates again? Well, when your PC restarts, hey, tell me if you've heard this one before, especially on this channel, you get a full page ad. A full page ad telling you to use Microsoft's recommended browser settings. In fact, moments after this photo was taken, this PC had all of its data backed up, and then once that data was backed up in multiple places, Windows was wiped from this computer, never to be installed again. And why are they saying use Microsoft's recommended browser settings? Why not say Microsoft Edge and be honest with people? Well, big corporations being honest is far too much to ask for in 2025, but there's a reason people don't like Edge. You should be able to use a Windows PC with any browser you want. Remember when you couldn't even change the default browser or the default apps, and they made it extremely hard for you to go through and change what the default browser was for every single extension? And what are they doing with Microsoft Edge? The same thing they're doing with Windows. The same thing they're doing with Outlook. They're using that data to train their AI to sell you more things for all of those hundreds of advertisers which pay them for the privilege. So if you said use Edge here, then people wouldn't want to click. But use Microsoft's recommended browser settings, people might accidentally click on that. And that's what they're betting on. So perhaps you think, all right, that's fine. I'll just go and uninstall Edge and everything will be fine. Go to Add and Remove Programs right now. If you're on a Windows computer, go to Add and Remove Programs. Now scroll down and tell me how many apps you can't uninstall. Isn't that odd? Because if it's system apps, things the computer absolutely needs to function, we all understand that. But why does Microsoft need Edge to function? Because it didn't need Edge before Edge existed. Windows 8 didn't need Edge. Windows 7 didn't need Edge. So if you've built the operating system so poorly that it will fall down the moment Edge is uninstalled, you've done a really bad job. And if it's not that, and you've actually built a really good operating system, then this is just removing more choice from people. Whichever way you spin it, it's bad. I should be able to uninstall anything I want on my computer. Some might even argue that they should be able to uninstall things even if it breaks. I'm not going to go that far, but still, you should be able to uninstall Edge. You should be able to uninstall these other programs, and you can't because it's not your computer. So these updates happen after you restart your computer. Why don't we just not restart our computers? Well, besides the fact that there is the occasional security update you might need, putting your computer to sleep on Windows, at least the last time I was using a Windows computer, was broken. Put it to sleep, the computer wakes back up immediately. Put it to sleep again, it wakes back up again. Maybe sometimes you get lucky and the sleep function works, but if that PC is in your bedroom, get ready to be woken up at 3 in the morning with a login screen. Guess what's on the login screen? An ad for using Edge. And then you end up turning off your computer anyway, because you wouldn't mind getting some sleep. But here's the other thing. After everything we've discussed here, everything we have gone over, do you think that it's just the sleep function being broken? Or do you think perhaps the company which is sharing all of your data with hundreds of advertisers perhaps is trying to get more of your data while you're trying to get some shut-eye? I'm not saying I know this for a fact, but it starts to play with your mind. If they're willing to go this far, where's the line? Where do they stop? Being a monopolistic company, that line doesn't exist. But maybe you really, really don't care how many ads you get. Maybe you consider yourself immune to advertising. Or perhaps you just want the newest and shiniest things and you don't care how many times things break. You just want the newest updates because that's just what you want. Well, this was covered in great length all across the internet when it was first announced, but it's worth mentioning again. Microsoft requires a TPM 2.0 chip. So if you want to upgrade to Windows 11 and you don't have that in your computer, your otherwise perfectly good hardware that absolutely didn't need a TPM chip, and not a lot of people knew what a TPM chip was until Microsoft said you needed one, now you need to throw out perfectly good hardware, which now becomes e-waste, just so you can use a Windows 11 computer. But maybe you want to stay on Windows 10, and there are so many people trying to stay on Windows 10. Guess what? No security updates. So all those people who decided that they were going to make horrible software to take advantage of people, well, now they have the doors wide open for anyone who wanted even the smallest illusion of privacy while using Windows, because without those security updates, it's a threat. By the way, did you notice how many similarities there were between Windows 10 and 11? This wasn't the Windows 8 to 10 jump. This wasn't the 7 to 8 jump. This wasn't even the Vista to 7 jump. They felt almost identical besides a new coat of paint. So the excuse of we can't do security updates, it's planned obsolescence. They're trying to get you to buy new hardware. It's almost the same as when Apple was slowing down everyone's older phones so they would naturally want to buy newer phones. And speaking of Apple, one thing that both Apple and Microsoft have in common in 2025 is how neither of them care about gaming. We've just mentioned the profitable Game Pass. Yeah, okay, we all believe you, sure. And it wouldn't be a fiscal year without Microsoft shutting down studios and canceling games before they ever had a chance. Even though Microsoft is out there preaching how committed they are to gaming. At this point, I hope everyone is catching on to the fact that when big corporations say something, don't listen to them. They're not saying it to you, they're saying it to their shareholders. Customers, consumers, everyday people who haven't invested stocks and shares into the company, they don't matter. It's just the shareholders. Line go up. But if you still think Microsoft cares, check this out. A version of Windows where you don't use a keyboard and mouse. Hold on a second. We have different lobbies for online games between controller and keyboard and mouse players, being that keyboard and mouse players have an advantage and you can aim a lot faster with a mouse. So now we're going to take that away. So Windows 12, no keyboard and mouse. So how are you meant to play games on Windows 12? You're not. And with the Xbox brand essentially being shut down at this point, between rumors of cancelled consoles and AI being shoved into absolutely everything, including gaming, Windows won't be the place to game anymore. Neither will Xbox. It might not even exist. Remember, this is all coming from someone who played exclusively on Xbox. This brand used to do things well. The 360 era was incredible. Now, where are their exclusives? Dead. And where is the privacy? Where's the security? Where is the genuine feeling of wanting to improve the Windows product for the entire world? It doesn't exist. It's all about making as much money from us as possible. And that doesn't mean taking our money directly. That means taking our data, because our data is worth something. And we shouldn't be just giving it away for free, especially to a company like Microsoft. But thanks to Valve and the Steam Deck, you don't have to play all of your PC games on Windows anymore. That massive collection of games, you'd be surprised how many of them work on alternative operating systems. So I'd encourage you, look for another solution, because at this point, Windows is only going to get worse. So get out while you still can.
All right, let's get a scenery shot on the way back here. A couple of little things I wanted to put in this video, but we'll definitely explore these in the next video. Is number one is these huge video cards. My last computer build, I couldn't figure out because the case directions, I bought a bad case for that build. And like I said, we're going to go over the case in the next video that I'm using for this new build. But I couldn't figure out how to brace that video card. So that video card is actually just sitting upright, putting a huge stress on that slot that I've got it in. And obviously I've got to go back and brace that video card. So ASUS makes a brace. We're going to go over it in the next video. It's like $35. You think, God, man, that's a lot of money for just to brace a video card. Well, when you have a $1,000 video card, you don't want it to snap off in your computer slot and damage both destroy your video card and damage the motherboard. So yes, you want to brace it properly. I mean, I was going to just cut a piece of wood and stick it in there, just, put it underneath the video card. But this ASUS thing, it's a hell of a lot better. And it's actually built for that specific task. The other thing you're going to want to do is whenever you've got a new motherboard, once you get it mounted, the first thing you're going to do is flash that BIOS. So I've already gone out and I've downloaded the latest BIOS, which for my motherboard was actually, the latest release was in September. Okay, and then you're going to put that BIOS, you just unzip it and then copy it to a formatted USB drive, where that's the only thing on the USB drive. So yeah, you might have to go to Amazon and buy a bunch of USB drives. I mean, they're dirt cheap now. I think I bought like 4 32 gigabyte USB drives for $40 or something like that. And you think, well, how in the world am I ever going to use 4 USB drives? You'd be surprised how fast you can use some USB drives. Especially, you're giving one to the funeral home, you're giving one to your lawyer. You've got one formatted for your BIOS. Now, the next tool I'm going to tell you, you can use Rufus. A lot of people swear by Rufus. Okay, you can look that up at Grok or even online, and you can build a bootable USB drive using Rufus. However, the tool that I use, and we're going to go over this in the next video again, is Ventoy. V-E-N-T-O-Y, Ventoy. It's a great operating system that you can load onto a USB drive. And the thing that's outstanding about it is you can take any ISO file. So you're saying, well, how do I get Linux Mint? Obviously, you're going to go to Linux Mint. I think it's linuxmint.org. And you're going to download the latest ISO file. You make a bootable USB drive using Ventoy. And then you just copy that ISO file onto the USB drive. Now, the cool thing is it's a multi-boot USB drive. So let's say you want to use gparted to partition your computer. You can download the ISO for gparted and put that on the USB drive. So now you've got both your operating system and a disk formatting tool. Or you can put other ISOs on there. Let's say you wanted to try Windows 11 first before you decided you're going to, I wouldn't recommend it, but because you're going to have to format those hard drives. Windows 11 is just, it never comes off clean. Okay, so if you did install it and tried it out before you go to Linux, you're going to want, and so you can download the latest Windows 11 ISO file and put that on that multi-boot USB drive. So now you can install Windows, try it out, and then reformat. Always reformat the hard drive, because Windows 11, it's not gonna come off clean, and it's going to fight you tooth and nail to load Linux on. And the other thing we're going to go over in the next video is the BIOS settings are different for Windows 11 than they are for Linux. Okay, now, Windows 11 does not work with the Linux operating or the BIOS settings that I'm going to recommend. However, Linux will work with the Microsoft BIOS settings, but there's reasons that you don't want to use them. Okay, so we're going to go over the BIOS settings for the motherboard that you're going to want to use with Linux Mint in the next video. All right, that's definitely it for this video, but I just want to hit on those things because I don't know if you're going to watch the next video or not. So at least you got all the information you need about the graphics card, the motherboard, the cooler, and that's it. And then of course we're going to go over all the other hardware in the next video.